Perhaps by now, after all that I've said, some of you might be getting a little hint about what I'm talking about when I'm speaking about the interaction, often the conflict between a meme and a gene. You see, it has to do with artificiality, or Baudrillard's simulation and simulacrum. What do I mean by artificiality? You see, all animals have an impact on their environment, but none of these impacts, except for one, has such a consequence where the result of this impact exceeds the influence of what preceded it. Let me be more clear in this way, defining what I mean by artificial and natural. When it comes to human beings, unlike, let's say, a beaver, which impacts its environment by building a dam to serve its needs, with humans, the impact upon the environment exceeds, in effect and influence, the environment which was intervened upon. This creates the emergence of institutionalization, institutions being enclosed, controlled environments within which minds can be birthed, raised, live their entire lives totally ignorant of what is occurring outside of the institutional parameters, the institutional walls. Just as a man who enters a jail could live an entire lifetime within artificial controlled environments, forgetting, except for a few glimpses here and there, of what nature is, so too in modern lifestyles. We are institutionalized, and part of this institutionalization is feminization, the emasculation of the entire species, including females, by the way. Whatever masculine traits remain to females. But this impact, this indoctrination, if you will, has more of a perceivable effect upon males. Males being the quintessential products of the evolved masculine sexual type. Within institutional frameworks, the emasculated male is preferred because he's more easily controlled. And if this male chooses to play video games or immerse himself in sporting events to cope with his state, his emasculated, effete state, then this does not harm the system itself. In fact, sports and video games are part of the process of diffusing masculine energy, whatever masculine energy still remains within the system. Having said that, every meme is not equal to every other meme. That is, every aggregate of morals, standards of measuring value, principles, attitudes towards others and the world at large are not created equal. In fact, there are as many memes as there are cultures, and each culture is an amalgamation of memes. In other words, every meme has its own ideal, which is based on its own goals. And each ideal either conflicts with what preceded the meme, that is the gene, to a greater extent or to a lesser extent. There are memes that conflict with genetic predispositions more than other memes. The memes that conflict with the genes are the more nihilistic ones, the ones that exhibit this unhappiness, this dissatisfaction with natural selection up to this point. So in fact they exhibit the dissatisfaction with the emergence of life and what it has come to up to this point. The nihilistic memes are more conflicting with the genes, and so they are more harder to adhere to. To give a simple example on the sphere of economics, capitalism is more closely related to natural human predispositions in opposition to communism. This is why communism fails to bring about its ideal man, because its ideal man is so extraordinary, so exaggerated, so hyperbolic, so as to demand a revolution, in fact, in genetics itself. The radicalism of many ideas, ideologies, ideals can be found in how radically they oppose natural selection, or how radically they confront and deny and dismiss nature itself. The most dominant, of course, of these nihilistic memes is Christianity itself. Everything in Christianity comes in direct contradiction to the perceived world. And this is why everything that is birthed through the morals, through the memes of Christianity, through its traditions, is in fact a nihilistic outcrop. Take humanism and Marxism, for instance. Marxism is the most glaring example, because in Marxism there is no real conflict between the morals of Marxism and Christianity. The only conflict is in the fact that Marxism denies the deity of a god. In everything else it's the same. It brings the deity down to earth. It brings paradise from a beyond to a yet to come. It places the beyond in the future, in something imminent. In this case it takes from Spinoza a lot. In Christianity, paradise, the world is contradicted, of course, by the more real reality of the beyond, the godly world, the Platonic, idealistic world, which in every way is characterized by how it contradicts everything that we experience in reality itself. With Marxism, the same contradiction is placed not in a beyond, but in a future. And this is where we get progressiveness. Liberalism, humanism is always the yet to come. It's always something that is about to come and yet is never established. It is always something that is so in conflict with nature itself, with everything that's in the past, that the past has to be denied, dismissed, forgotten, rejected as something that should be. Thou shalt, after all, that should be denied, dismissed, and forgotten, which is called overcome. Another word for it is enlightenment. To be enlightened means to surpass the past, to surpass the determinism of the past. And of course this comes most easily to those who have the least to lose from this dismissal, from the ones for whom the past is so unflattering, so hurtful, that forgetting about it, unburdening themselves from it, is felt as a relief, as something pleasurable. This is the pleasure of the born again. The born again unloads the past, is relieved as an ass is relieved once its master unloads its weight. A born again or unenlightened spirit is the one that has unloaded its baggage. It's even in the language being used, we can see this unloading, this denial of baggage, not carrying baggage, forgetting about the past, living in the present, living in the immediate, like an animal does. In fact, becoming as an animal, totally contained within the event, the perceptual event horizons of an animal, a self-dumbing down. We can see this same process not only in Christianity and Judaism and Islam, but also in the outcrops of these dogmas. In feminism, this unburdening of one's sexual proclivities, one's sexuality. And now we see it in the MRAs, this abandoning, this letting go, this forgetting, this denying of one's own sexuality. Felt, of course, because it can only be a relief for such creatures. Felt as a rebirth. In fact, even in another outcrop of Marxism, anarchism, we see the same desire to to use modern terminology, to reboot reality, to start over, to deny everything of the present because it's so degrading, so unflattering, so undesirable, and to start over, to level everything down in order to start over. And this is why it mostly attracts males, because males want to replay the game, want to start over. They don't want to deal with the hierarchies as they are, but they want to flatten the playing field down to make it easier for themselves. This is what anarchy is. It's a method of leveling down the playing field, because most males imagine that they will fare better under such circumstances. Again, let's take feminism as our starting point. It was male on male competition. This desire for one male tribe to overcome the advantages of another male tribe, the physical advantages, which resulted in the technologies we experience later. For instance, when a man invented the gun, or the bow and arrow at first, it was so as to overcome an advancement in the opposite camp, which was meant to overcome male dominance, the tradition of another male. And this then became the weapon of females and children. Technologies begin by the conflict of one tribe against the other, this desire to overcome another. Then they result in the undesirable, the unforeseeable byproduct of offering the weakest an opportunity to overcome their own disadvantages. For the females, technology, this male-on-male competition, offered them the potential of overcoming their own genetic, their own sexual inadequacies. Ironically, the MRAs are using the same technologies. They are dreaming about the same technological advancements, a future world where technology will offer them an escape from their own genetic inadequacies, their own genetic inferiorities. We see here how technology becomes a tool for compensation. It begins as a tool for compensating for a tribal weakness, a mimetic weakness in regards to another meme, one paternalism struggling against another. And then it results in an internal struggle, since it offers internally the weakest of the weak a weapon, a method of overcoming their own inadequacies. For females, the advancement of technology offered them first a defense to deal with their inferior physical and mental nature. So a woman can hold a weapon and take down a male who is smarter and physically superior to her. In fact, even a child can do so. And later, of course, with the advancement of technologies, it offered her the opportunity to escape the risks and the costs of her sexual role. In the past, her sexual role demanded a risk-taking. She had to take care not to reproduce with inadequate and inferior male, because she would have to live with it for the rest of her life. In modern systems, technologies offered her a way out of this. So now she could fuck around with anybody and it would have no costs. There would be no risk. And since there would be no risk, there would be no respect. I will deal with the respect on another installment of my videos. In fact, this slow elimination of risk-taking not only leveled down the playing field, but resulted in a carelessness, a juvenile behavior and attitude, a boredom also, since without risk there's no interest, there's no care, and so life becomes humdrum. Everything becomes boring and dull because there's no cost, and where there's no cost there's no interest. So females with technology, they were given an escape from the immediate impact of their nature, not of their their nature in general, because the past cannot be erased by technology so fast. In fact, it would take generations upon generations before emasculation actually has an impact. But it offered them an immediate escape, a way out of their nature, so then they can go out to the bar and, under the pretense of free speech and free expression, they could become sexually provocative, knowing that the male cannot use his own sexuality. So the MRAs, what are they dreaming of? They are dreaming of a technological advancement which would offer them a way out of their own sexual inadequacies and inferiorities, a correction to nature. And this is where the commonality between feminism and the MRAs, and in fact with all these progressive ideologies, these nihilistic ideologies, humanism, let's say, and Marxism and liberalism, this is where it becomes more evident, more clear. Therefore, all MRAs want, just like feminists, is for technology to step in and offer them a compensation, a correction, an escape out of their inheritance, out of their genes, out of their past. That's what technology does. It compensates for an inferior past. It's a fast track, a mental fast track towards the correction, the slow correction of genes, natural adaptation, natural selection. In this case, though, the fast track is not offered by the individual himself, but he purchases it. He gains it through a third party that sells it to him. He gains access to it by being the most effete and emasculated slave to the system. So you enslave yourself to the system, you purchase the credits in order to compensate for your natural deficiencies. We can see here the common ground between MRAs and feminism again, but also between these two most latest manifestations of modern thinking and the most recent past: humanism, liberalism, Marxism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. There's a common thread here. In fact, even these players, these players, they depend heavily on institutional controls, because otherwise being a player would be quite a risk, a life-threatening risk. And we also see here the relationship between homosexuality and pedophilia and many other sexual dysfunctions or mutations, and the modern lifestyles, how they are permitted to persist even though they are unfit from a natural standpoint to persist. Especially homosexuality and pedophilia are unfit in the fact that their sexual attraction is towards an entity that cannot offer them a reproductive outcome. They are parasitical in that sense, in that they depend upon heterosexual, normal, let's say normal, reproduction, without getting into the what's the age limit and all that. For me, what bleeds needs. That's the basic. I take nature as my standard in everything. But when we talk about pedophilia, we're talking about an attraction towards an immature individual, a male or a female, who cannot offer you anything more than a psychological benefit. So we see here in pedophilia and in homosexuality the common ground. This is why I think even with pedophilia, once certain aspects of the family are dealt with, it might, like homosexuality, challenge the system to become, like homosexuality again, a norm, to break the social barriers. And I think many pedophiles find in the acceptance of homosexual behavior an inspiration which promises them a future, a nihilistic future, an imminent future, a progress. If we follow through with the logic of what we call progressive in Western modernity, we will see that it is quintessentially anti-life, anti-world, anti-reality, anti-nature. And I think I mentioned Heisman before and Weiniger, both of which belong to a meme which preached a very nihilistic dogma. And in order to adhere, at least Heisman admitted this in his text and his final words, which I urge everybody to read. It's called the Suicide Note. Very appropriate. He said that he committed suicide because he wanted to remain true to his people's dogma, which was the connection, the immersion with the nil, with the nothing. I don't know if Weiniger had similar thoughts, but it's ironic that these two Jews would take their lives having said what they said because they wanted to remain true to the underlying premise within their own meme, a meme that is now becoming universal, global, through its connection, its mutation through the connection with Hellenism, which was a very universal, open, and yet life-affirming meme. And so it took from Hellenism the later parts of it, its degradation after democracy had come into play, showing how Hellenism had reached its apex and was now declining. Socrates was a symptom of Hellenic decay, and Plato, being the voice of Socrates, is the representation of this decay. And this is why Plato is so popular amongst the Western youths and the Western people, because he's the bridge along with Jesus and Socrates and Jesus being these characters that nobody knows for certain if they were real characters or just symbols. Nevertheless, they were the conduits through which this connection occurred between aspects of Hellenism and Judaic nihilism, and made Judaism, the nihilism of Judaism, universal or global. It made it viral through its connection with the Greek spirit. Marxism is the final stage of this process. Marxism, taking away the element of God, sought to become even more universal. That is, Judaism, it was nihilistic, but it was very self-absorbed. It was very selective. It was very elitist. After all, the Jews believed that God selected them, and only them, after all other people had rejected God. To what? To be God's representatives, to suffer on behalf of God. This is why suffering, to be a victim, is so connected with Judaism. Later, like I said, this evolved into Christianity, which was less elitist, in that it only proposed that it only asked for the individual's surrender to the symbol of Jesus Christ. Once you accepted Jesus, then you could be saved. Unlike Judaism was very restrictive. You had to be born into Judaism to be saved. Whereas with Christianity, you could actually be saved by surrendering to the nihilism through Jesus. Marxism went a step further. It eliminated God altogether, making itself even more globalizing, more universal, more viral. Now you don't even need to surrender to Jesus. You just have to belong to the underclass. You just have to be poor. You just have to be born within a people, any people. And you would have to be poor and degenerate and ill and desperate to benefit from this ideology. And of course, from Marxism we get liberalism, we get humanism, which you just have to be born human to belong to the select group. But not all humans. You just have to accept your immersion into humanity. By accepting your identity as human, that means you surrender to the identity, and therefore you make your every action an action dedicated towards the benefit of humanity.